Hello and welcome to my Unit 2 research document. My name is Freddie Churchill and I hope you enjoy. Back in my room again, although, as you can see, I've got a nice clean background now, so and I'm also not in my pyjamas, so yeah. Hopefully this one will be a bit better than the last one. And in order to do that, I've decided to go over the learning objectives with you now. I'm just going to interpret them in my own way, so I hope you're ready for that. LO1. Evidence, a developed body of work that evidences a critical awareness of current problems and or insights, knowledge, realization. Well, what does that mean? The way that I'm choosing to look at this, I guess, interpreting the words simply, is that my work is in some way critically engaging with maybe a current or an issue that's relevant to human society, maybe? Current problems or insights? I mean, not all work has to be about current issues, really, does it? I know this is contemporary art, but, it seems a bit limiting. I'm simply going to interpret this as you guys trying to say, we'd like to see a developed body of work that is aware of the context it operates in. LO2. Demonstrate a practical understanding of how to create and interpret critical context to activate your work. Brackets, inquiry and communication. I think what this is trying to say, more simply, is basically saying, to my understanding, is how does your work, having been created, communicate effectively the issues it's trying to deal with? How effectively does it communicate, oh, my work is about storytelling, let's just say. How effectively does it do that? LO3. Manage and present your practice to professional standard, evidencing initiative and responsibility necessary for employment or professional life. That's basically just kind of website, CV, professional presentation, stuff like that. So, if you don't know my work, I'll be going over that a little bit now. I'll be showing examples as well as we go through some of the work that I have created and I'm now currently creating. I'll be explaining a little bit about the context that sits in, and about some of the research that I've done in this project, about some of the things that I've tried to explore and develop, and where I see my practice going. A brief overview of my practice at the moment. In the broadest of strokes, it's about storytelling and the storyteller. It's about the artist in relation to themselves and how we inevitably feature in our own work all the time. But this is a piece of satire about that. A lot of my work is satirical in that way. And I lampoon the idea by taking on a very exaggerated form of that in my own artwork, where I include myself in my artwork over and over and over again to the point of spiral and deification. In the beginning of this year, I produced a few videos. Initially this one, which was about the different kinds of storyteller that exist, and the different aspects of them, if you will. I was trying to categorize it in a very simple way. A nicely produced video, but I felt that it wasn't self-aware enough, even though it's me in every single frame, and it's me putting myself in that position. I wanted to go further. So, I moved on to this one. This is an hour-long piece, and you can see it on my website if you want, but it's probably a bit longer than you have time for. Stick it on the background, why not? But this piece was last term. I'm just providing context. This piece here was a big spiral into madness, a self-referential madness, self-critical madness. And this was, I think, a lot of the fuel that I currently have for my current project, discussing things like repeating narratives, the way that we insert ourselves into our stories, how eventually you know when you're in the elevator or the lift and the mirror just goes on forever until it becomes blurred, or the photocopy gets photocopied so many times that you eventually can't see it? It's like that. Eventually the story loses all meaning because it's basically just you, if that makes sense. And so now I have begun to move into that kind of frame of reference. I've started to explore this idea of the deification of the self and the kind of madness that comes with that. The kind of king going, mad with power, as, inevitably they only see the reflection of themselves in their own work. And you get the echo chamber, if you will. So I decided to explore that. I started to produce shows like this, where you could only see, pictures of myself, and I started to put myself on beer bottles, in fact. There's a few of them here. Classic. Good fun. And of course, these large pictures of myself that I started to put around exhibitions. A lot of people like to ask me why, and I would often tell them it's just funny, but that's just me being crass. Really, it's about trying to embody as much as I can the position of an artist who only sees themselves in their work, who sees themselves as the pinnacle of that, of arrogance and self-absorption. That's what I want to explore. And I think it's pretty obvious, at least when I stand next to it. However, this wasn't all. I was also exploring a digital medium, a new medium, if you will, that I hadn't explored before. Completely new to me. Video games. Coding. All this new stuff that I had never experienced before. Having to learn so much nonsense, but with an outcome. It initially started with these text-based adventure games that I was exploring. Inspired, if you will, by some of the Dungeons and Dragons I play and the stories of old, Robin Hood and George and the Dragon, all that kind of stuff that I was piled on me in my childhood. So I'd create these and also, choose your own adventure games. Distinct context for this. Started to create a lot of these, thought they went quite well, and then moved on. Moved on to an actual game that you can play right now on my website if you want to. You're meant to assess my stuff, remember? But anyway, you can play it on my website. And I was very impressed, so much that I'm probably going to put some in my final show. I think it's really cool, and I think there's a lot of potential. And a distinct lack of myself, but only if you look. In this game I needed to, I was just setting the groundworks for making more games. I didn't include myself as much as I could have. I did in some of the text lines here and there, and a couple little secrets there, but it was an exploration of an idea which I'm going to push further in my degree show, which you should come to, whoever's watching this. So, now that you've seen a little bit of my work, we're going to have a little look through some of the research that I've done. I call it research, I'd rather call it my influences. This is what I've been consuming at the time, and I'm a big believer in consuming so you can produce. You must eat so you can sheet. I'm not going to say that, I'm going to cut that out. No, you know what, I'll leave it in. You've got to consume so you can produce. And I find it very important to expand on that, not just artistically, but like everything that I'm consuming at the moment. I mean, this work is a reflection of me in a way, so some of it should be apparent. So, quick scan through some of the artists that have inspired me previously. You've got Lawrence Weiner and Joseph Kosuth, two artists who kind of predominantly featured as parts of the conceptual artists in the 1960s. These artists dealt with taking the artwork into the mind, if you will, dealing with the concepts of the work more heavily. Conceptual artists, as they said. Joseph Kosuth as well wrote a very expansive book about very similar topics, and for me that was my first introduction to taking the artwork out of the physical realm and allowing it to be more than what it actually is conceptually. Next we have Harrison and Wood. in a way, conceptual artists, but I want to call them more modern and up-to-date. They're even working to this day, and I've visited them and they're great. Love the work that they do. But what was different for me and why I like them so much is because they introduced aspects of humour into their work. It's something I feel is quite important for communication these days. Additionally, Maurizio Cattelan, a very notorious artist who does a lot of very similar satirical, silly stuff. All involving an aspect of the self as well, and kind of engaging with satire around ridiculing the artist in a way, which makes sense as to the work that I'm doing these days, really. Right, quick fire, a couple of these coming at you real quick. A number of other influences that have influenced me, things like Dungeons and Dragons, the Iliad, Greek mythology, current day mythology, all the kind of aspects of storytelling that we find throughout the world. Some of my previous work about AI and removing the artists from themselves, that I think features quite importantly in a lot of my work these days, because that's still about the role of the creator. However, it's the complete opposite of what I'm doing today. You could almost call it a reaction, the work that I'm doing at the moment, to the work I did previously. Also, of course, Alan Butler, Kathy McWhorter, and okay, so let's go over the learning objectives again. Is my work critically aware of the context I place it in? Yes, I think so. I think that the work very aptly sits in an interesting context, one that will never go out of fashion, I think, as long as people create and as long as we humans are organised in a society. Well, storytelling was the first form of communication before anything, really. Before language, we drew on walls. And I think storytelling today is developing in so many different ways. I think that my work strikes on a key point of that, which is also video games. I think the context and the want for video game art, or fine art, as video games is thriving. And I think it's only going to get bigger. So I think I'm onto something personally, but not to blow my own horn. So the next question is essentially, well, I'll reword it to, how does my work address the context it sits in, and how effectively does it do that? Well, I think I work in a variety of mediums, and they all come to a variety of communicative efficacy. I think the stuff that I'm working on at the moment is very effective, because it very obviously spells out what it's trying to say. So I think it's effective in its communication. I think there is an issue with engagement with video game art. It requires a very specific context, so is not as universally appreciated. However, I still think there's a place for it, and I think it can grow. And outside of technical issues regarding the work, I think it's pretty effective, as I hopefully have shown you. And if you go to my website, you can click on a little link there that will take you to my game, and you can play, just like instantly, if you're on a computer, that is, which you should be. So, yeah, you tell me. You're going to tell me. Learning outcome 3. I think professionalism is a strange one. I'd like to think that I could turn this into a career. I really would. It's a hope and a dream. But who knows, maybe it won't make me happy. I'll never know, really. Until I try. And maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know. I just don't know. I think I conduct myself with a level of professionalism. And I think my work is quite well documented, produced, presented as well. I think the website's good. I like it. I've had feedback saying it's a bit, all over the place and varied, but truthfully, that's who I am. That's the work that I make. And I wouldn't want to sacrifice my creative integrity for professionalism, personally. I think if I do that, what's the point in doing any of this at all? Is that too much of a criticism? I get in trouble for criticising the system a lot and people that mark me. I didn't get a job because of that. I'll go with a concluding statement. I've had feedback in places where some of my ideas are a little bit stunted, but I've worked on that. I've produced less this term intentionally. I've produced less so I can sink more into one project. I've had a lot of longer projects where I've had the ability to work harder on them rather than impulsively bashing ideas. I have done that, but I've challenged myself. To conclude, I think that a lot of what I've done has been very successful. I'm very happy with what I've got. I think it's enjoyable. I think it's funny. I think the work that I present and the way I present it is quite good. And hopefully you've enjoyed this as well. Might be a bit of an opinion poll, but I hope it's been a bit more enjoyable than just reading a piece of paper. I'd be pretty bored of that by now. I've tried to create this facade of the self-absorbed artist in my work, one that is so tunneled in on them being the centre of attention, them being the subject of their work and the product of their work as well. I think it's good. And I know that there's a lot of artists that have done that before, in the 90s and stuff like that, but I don't think I'm there. I think it's satire, and I think it's obviously a joke as well. But I think it's taking a more holistic approach, a more zoomed out approach than maybe previous ones have done. Yeah, fuck it. I'll make these claims. I think I'm brilliant. Oh, the irony. Thanks for listening. Give me an A. Give me an A. Give it to me. Please. How can you sit through all this? Really? Freddie's pretending to not be self-absorbed. He's doing it because he needs to for the assessment, but you should know. Freddie doesn't even know if he's crazy. Freddie doesn't even know if he loves himself that much. He's hoping he isn't. He's hoping he doesn't. But he doesn't know.